My name is Caroline Mercer. I'm 32 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought the most difficult part of planning my wedding would be choosing between ivory and champagne table linens. I was wrong. The most difficult part turned out to be discovering that the man I planned to marry had been measuring my love by the price tags attached to it. Ethan Cole and I had been together for 4 years and engaged for 6 months. Our wedding was scheduled for the following spring. We had toured venues, argued playfully over cake flavors, and created a shared folder filled with photographs of houses we hoped to buy after the ceremony. I worked in finance and earned around $140,000 a year. Ethan was a marketing coordinator making approximately $55,000. The difference had never bothered me. We divided our expenses proportionally. I covered more of the mortgage, utilities, travel, and dinners because I earned more. Ethan contributed what we had agreed was fair. At least I thought we agreed. We also had goals: a larger house, emergency savings, retirement, children someday. Although neither of us was in a hurry, I believed we were building something together. Then we went to dinner at Daniel and Jessica Reed's house. Daniel had been one of Ethan's closest friends since college. Jessica came from a successful family and ran a consulting firm with her older sister. She was confident, generous, and the kind of woman who could enter a room without appearing to seek attention and somehow receive all of it anyway. That evening, however, the attention belonged to the metallic black BMW X5 parked in their driveway. Jessica had bought it for Daniel, not for his birthday, not for an anniversary. According to Daniel, she had simply decided his old car was becoming unreliable and wanted him to have something safer. Ethan acted as though he had witnessed a marriage proposal. He circled the vehicle twice, opened every door, photographed the interior, and sat behind the wheel, while Daniel demonstrated the technology. "This thing is incredible," Ethan said, running his hand over the steering wheel. "She just surprised you with it." Daniel laughed. Apparently my complaining about the transmission finally became unbearable. Jessica stood beside me, smiling. "He's exaggerating. His old car needed repairs every 3 months. I smiled too, but something about Ethan's expression unsettled me. He wasn't merely impressed. He looked envious. During dinner, he returned to the BMW repeatedly. Jessica was generous. Jessica understood how to make her husband feel appreciated. Jessica knew that money was meant to be enjoyed. Each compliment sounded harmless on its own. Together they formed a message I didn't fully understand until the drive home. For the first 10 minutes, Ethan stared out the passenger window. "What's wrong?" I finally asked. "Nothing." His voice had the particular flatness that always meant something. I waited. Eventually, he sighed. "Why can't you be more like Daniel's wife?" My hands tightened slightly around the steering wheel. "What does that mean?" "She bought him a BMW, Caroline. A BMW. For no reason. She said his old car kept breaking down. That's not the point. She did it because she loves him." The words settled heavily between us. "We've been saving for a house," I reminded him. "You agreed that was the priority. Other people can do both. Jessica earns more than I do, and her family has money. Then work harder. Get promoted." I glanced at him, certain I had misunderstood. He was staring straight ahead. "Excuse me. I'm just saying other women provide for their husbands properly." Properly. The word cut deeper than it should have. I had paid 70% of our shared expenses for years. I had covered vacations when Ethan could not afford them, replaced his laptop after it died, and quietly transferred money to him when an emergency dental procedure emptied his savings. I had never made him feel ashamed for earning less. Now he was describing me as though I had failed a test whose rules he had deliberately hidden. I didn't argue. I drove home. Ethan remained cold for the rest of the night. The following morning he answered my questions with single words and left without kissing me goodbye. I assumed the mood would pass. Instead, it became a campaign. For the next week, Jessica appeared in nearly every conversation. Jessica took Daniel on spontaneous weekend trips. Jessica bought him designer watches. Jessica never asked Daniel to split restaurant bills. Jessica understood that a husband wanted to feel taken care of. At first, I tried to laugh it off. By the second week, every comparison felt like a small blade. One evening, while I reviewed our savings plan, Ethan walked behind me and noticed the balance. "You have enough to loosen up," he said. "That money is for our house. We could save for a house and enjoy our lives. We do enjoy our lives." He gave me a disappointed look, not like Daniel does. I closed the laptop. For the first time since our engagement, I wondered whether Ethan saw me as his partner or as an underperforming investment. The answer arrived the following Saturday. We were having coffee with another couple when the husband casually mentioned that he and his wife had signed a prenuptial agreement. Ethan laughed. "People still do that." The husband shrugged. "It protected both of us. Best decision we made." After they left, Ethan continued criticizing the idea. "Imagine making the person you love sign legal paperwork like they're a business transaction," he said. "It's insulting." Something clicked into place. That night, I messaged Daniel. Random question. "Did you and Jessica sign a prenup?" His answer appeared within minutes. "Yes, a strong one. Her financial advisor insisted before we got engaged." "Why?" I stared at the screen. The woman Ethan had transformed into the gold standard of marital generosity had protected every dollar she owned before giving her husband anything. I typed back, "Ethan keeps telling me to be more like her. I thought I should understand the entire model." Daniel responded with a laughing emoji. "Good luck with that conversation." The opportunity came at dinner the next evening. Ethan was scrolling through luxury vehicles on his phone. "I've been thinking," he said. "After the wedding, maybe I should get something more substantial." "Like what?" He turned the screen toward me. "A BMW." I nodded slowly. "Good point." His expression brightened. "Really?" "Absolutely. You've convinced me. I should become more like Jessica in every way." He smiled as though he had finally won. "I'm glad you understand what I've been trying to say." "I do. Which is why I'm going to start with a prenuptial agreement." His smile disappeared. "What?" "Jessica has one. You want me to follow her example, so I will." "That's different." "How?" "It just is. Jessica protects her premarital assets. I should do the same." Ethan pushed his chair back. "You don't trust me." "It has nothing to do with trust. It's financial planning." "That's cold, Caroline. You called Jessica generous and successful. Her prenup is part of the same financial system that allows her to be generous." He stood so quickly that his glass rattled. "I can't believe you would suggest this after 4 years. I'm following your advice. You're twisting my words." "No, Ethan. I'm finally listening to all of them." He left that night and went to his mother's house. On Tuesday morning, I contacted family law attorney Alicia Grant. After I explained the comparisons, the BMW and Daniel's revelation, she leaned back in her chair. "So your fiancé wants Jessica's lifestyle," she said, "but not the protection that makes that lifestyle financially responsible. That appears to be the situation. Then let's draft something fair." The agreement protected my condominium retirement accounts, investments, and premarital savings. It kept our existing debts separate and provided increasing support depending on the length of the marriage. Nothing extreme. Nothing punitive. On Friday evening, Ethan asked to come home. He arrived carrying takeout, his usual peace offering, and spoke about work as though the previous week had never happened. I let him finish eating. Then, I placed an envelope on the table. His face changed before he even touched it. "What is that?" "The prenup. You actually hired a lawyer. You wanted me to match Jessica's energy." He stared at the envelope, like it contained evidence of a crime. "It's fair," I said. "Your own attorney can review it." "My attorney? You need independent counsel." Ethan slowly stood. "I need time to think." He left the envelope unopened. This time, I didn't follow him. I sat alone at the table, listening to the silence he left behind, and realized that the document wasn't frightening him because it was unfair. It frightened him because for the first time, my generosity would have boundaries. By Saturday morning, Ethan had apparently decided that if he couldn't convince me himself, he would outsource the job to everyone who had ever attended one of his birthday parties. My phone started vibrating before 8. His mother called first, then his sister, then his best friend. I ignored every call, but the voicemails arrived one after another, each carrying a different version of the same accusation. How could I humiliate Ethan with a prenup? How could I treat the man I loved like a financial threat? How could I reduce marriage to numbers? His mother's message lasted nearly 4 minutes. You should be ashamed of yourself, Caroline. My son is a wonderful man. He could have married anyone and he chose you. You should feel lucky. This prenup nonsense is disrespectful, cruel, and completely unnecessary. Call me immediately. I listened to it twice. Not because I doubted what she had said, but because I wanted to hear whether she mentioned my condo, my retirement accounts, or the investments I had spent 12 years building. She didn't. She spoke only about what Ethan deserved. I forwarded the voicemail to Alicia. Her response came within minutes. Document everything. Family pressure before a prenup is exactly the kind of conduct courts scrutinize later. That sentence stayed with me. I had spent 4 years believing Ethan's family saw me as a person. Now they were treating me like a locked account they needed to pressure open. On Sunday afternoon, Ethan appeared at my door with his mother Diane and his older sister Lauren. He didn't ask whether they could come in. Diane stepped forward as soon as I opened the door. We need to discuss this prenup situation. Her voice had the calm authority of someone who believed the outcome had already been decided. I looked at Ethan. He avoided my eyes. Come in, I said. Part of me knew I should have refused. Another part needed to see how far they were willing to go. They sat together on my couch while I took the chair opposite them. Ethan positioned himself between his mother and sister, looking less like my fiancé than a defendant surrounded by his legal team. Diane began immediately. This agreement is completely unacceptable. It's a standard prenup. Lauren gave a sharp laugh. Standard for whom? You're not some billionaire heiress. No, I said. But I own this condo. Diane waved one hand dismissively. A condo is not a fortune. It's worth approximately $320,000. The room became quieter. I continued. My retirement accounts total around $180,000. I have another $95,000 in investments. All of that existed before Ethan and I became engaged. Lauren blinked. You have almost $600,000, approximately $595,000 in premarital assets. Ethan looked at me then, not with surprise. He knew the numbers. But hearing them stated in front of his family seemed to make them more real. The prenup protects those assets, I said. It also protects Ethan from any premarital debt I might have, and it protects me from his student loans. Diane folded her arms. Marriage is about sharing everything. Then why didn't Ethan object when Jessica protected her assets? The effect was immediate. Ethan's face tightened. Lauren looked at him. What does Jessica have to do with this? A great deal. Ethan spent 2 weeks telling me I should be more like her. He praised the BMW, the trips, the gifts, and the way she pays for everything. What he didn't mention was that Jessica and Daniel have a prenup. Diane turned toward her son. Is that true? Ethan shifted on the couch. That's different. I leaned forward. Everyone keeps saying that. I'm still waiting for someone to explain how. Jessica's family has money, Ethan said. So financial protection is acceptable when someone is wealthier than I am. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you're saying. Lauren tried another approach. You're acting like Ethan is trying to steal from you. No. I'm acting like someone who was told repeatedly that love should be measured through expensive gifts. If Ethan wants me to follow Jessica's example, then I will follow the whole example. Diane's expression hardened. If you loved him, you wouldn't need paperwork. The sentence landed differently than she intended. I felt something in me become still. If Ethan loved me, I said quietly, he wouldn't spend weeks comparing me to another woman and demanding that I spend money like her while refusing to accept the financial boundaries she uses. No one answered. Ethan stared at the floor. That silence told me more than an argument would have. They left 10 minutes later. Diane walked out first. Lauren followed, muttering that I had become obsessed with money. Ethan paused at the door. You embarrassed me. I told the truth. You made me sound greedy. I described what happened. That's not the same thing. It should be. He left without kissing me. On Monday afternoon, Jessica called. Her name appeared on my screen while I was reviewing a report at work. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. "Caroline," she said, her voice unusually careful. "This is awkward. That seems to be the theme of my week." She gave a nervous laugh. "Daniel told me you asked about our prenup." "I did. And you told Ethan." "He told me to be more like you." There was a pause. "Maybe you shouldn't have mentioned our private agreement." "Why?" "Because our circumstances are complicated." "How?" "My family has assets. The business investments, property. The prenup made sense for us. And it makes sense for me. I'm not saying it doesn't." "It sounds like you are." She sighed. "Ethan is upset. He was comfortable with your prenup when he didn't know it existed." "That's different." I closed my eyes. "Jessica, you bought your husband a $75,000 vehicle, and Ethan used that gift to question whether I loved him properly. Your prenup is part of the full financial picture he refused to see. I didn't ask him to compare you to me." "I know. But I'm not going to pretend your generosity exists without structure just because the truth is inconvenient for him." She went quiet. Finally, she said, "I understand why you're protecting yourself. Then there's nothing else to discuss." The call ended politely but coldly. By Tuesday evening, Ethan had retained a lawyer. He arrived at my condo with a man named Martin Shaw, whose office letterhead suggested he handled everything from traffic violations to landlord disputes. Martin looked uncomfortable before he even sat down. He placed my prenup on the coffee table. "I've reviewed the agreement," he said. "My attorney is thorough." "Yes, perhaps too thorough." "In what way?" He opened the document and flipped through several pages. "The asset protection, debt separation, and lifestyle provisions strongly favor your interests. They protect both parties equally." "Technically, yes. Not technically. Literally." Martin cleared his throat. "Ethan feels vulnerable under the compensation schedule. The agreement allows increasing support based on the length of the marriage. Before 10 years, compensation is limited. After 10 years, it becomes significantly more equitable." Ethan crossed his arms. "I'm supposed to be your husband, not an employee receiving a termination package. You're the one who asked me to copy Jessica. I wanted you to be generous, like her. She protects herself. That doesn't mean you have to." "Why not?" His frustration rose. "Because you're turning our marriage into a business arrangement." "No, Ethan. I'm preventing our marriage from becoming a financial ambush." Martin lifted a hand. "Perhaps we should focus on areas that can be negotiated." "Fine," I said. "What specific clause is unfair?" He glanced at Ethan. Neither of them answered immediately. I continued. "Ethan keeps everything he brings into the marriage. His income remains his. His personal assets remain his. His student debt remains his. I keep my condo retirement accounts and investments. Anything we build together during the marriage is handled according to the agreement. What part of that is unequal?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "The part where you have more to protect." I stared at him. For the first time, he had said the truth without disguising it. "So, the prenup is unfair, because I planned, saved, and invested before meeting you." "That's not what I mean." "It is exactly what you mean." Martin shifted in his seat. "Could we, perhaps, increase the early marriage compensation?" "Based on what contribution?" Ethan stood. "This is ridiculous. You're choosing money over me. You chose a BMW fantasy over reality." His face flushed. "We're done here." They left. Martin gave me an apologetic glance on the way out. It lasted less than a second, but I saw it. Even Ethan's own attorney understood what this had become. The next morning, someone unexpected called. Ethan's father. Richard and I had always gotten along. He was quieter than Diane, practical and generally allergic to family drama. "Caroline," he said. "What exactly is happening?" I explained everything. The dinner, the BMW, the comparisons, the prenup, Ethan's reaction, the family intervention. Richard listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long silence. "So let me understand this," he finally said. "My son spent weeks telling you to be more like Jessica." "Yes." "You found out Jessica has a prenup." "Yes." "You got a similar agreement." "Yes." "And now he's angry because you followed his advice too completely." That summarizes it. Another pause. "That's pretty stupid." I almost laughed. "He's still your son." He can be my son and still be stupid. Richard sighed. Give me a day. On Thursday morning, Ethan texted. Dad, talk to me. I'm willing to discuss compromises. We met at a coffee shop because neither of us trusted the emotional weight of my condo anymore. Ethan arrived with a notebook, actual handwritten notes. For one brief moment, I felt hopeful. Maybe Richard had reached him. Maybe Ethan had finally understood that this wasn't punishment. He sat across from me and folded his hands. I talked to Dad. He helped me understand that the prenup isn't completely unreasonable. I waited, but it needs changes. What changes? He slid the notebook toward me. I read the first demand twice because I assumed I had misunderstood it. Remove the early divorce lifestyle limitation. The second demand was worse. Pay Ethan's $45,000 student loan balance before the wedding as a gesture of trust. The third demand made my stomach turn. Guarantee him a luxury vehicle valued at no less than $150,000 within the first year of marriage. I looked up. Are you serious? These are the terms under which I'd feel comfortable signing. Comfortable. I deserve security too. You have security. You keep your income, your assets, and your career. I don't have what you have. That doesn't entitle you to it. His face changed. That's a cruel thing to say to the man you're supposed to marry. No, Ethan. Cruel would be pretending this is a compromise. It is a compromise. You want me to pay your debt, buy you a luxury car, and guarantee you support as though we'd been married for more than 10 years, even if you leave after one. I'm trying to protect myself. No. You're trying to receive all the benefits of my protection, while accepting none of the responsibility. His eyes narrowed. Then, we have a problem. We do. I closed the notebook and slid it back. Then I stood. Ethan looked startled. Where are you going? Home. We're not finished. I am. I walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. My hands were shaking by the time I reached my car, but it wasn't fear. It was grief. For 4 years, I had believed Ethan wanted to build a life with me. Now I understood that he had been comfortable with partnership, only while he assumed my success would eventually become his property. The prenup had not damaged our relationship. It had simply turned on the lights. And I was finally seeing what had been standing in front of me all along. The next 2 weeks stripped away every illusion I still had about the woman I thought I was becoming. Not because Ethan changed overnight, because pressure has a way of revealing what love has been hiding. The first call came from his uncle, a man I had met exactly 3 times. He didn't bother with introductions. You're tearing this family apart. I was sitting in my office finishing a quarterly report when his name flashed across my phone. I almost declined the call. Curiosity won. How exactly am I doing that? With this ridiculous prenup, I'm protecting assets I earned before I met Ethan. No, you're treating him like a gold digger. I looked out my office window at the city skyline. What was Ethan asking me to become? Silence. He wanted me to be more like Jessica. So, Jessica has a prenup. You keep saying that like it matters. It matters because everyone keeps praising Jessica's marriage, while condemning mine for following the exact same financial structure. You know what your problem is. I'm sure you're about to tell me. You're being difficult. I'm being consistent. He hung up. That became a pattern. Everyone accused me of creating conflict. No one addressed the contradiction. Even Ethan's grandmother called. Unlike everyone else, she sounded genuinely heartbroken. Sweetheart, she said softly, can't you just let this paperwork go? My chest tightened. I loved his grandmother. She had knitted us blankets for our first apartment. She remembered every birthday. She always insisted I take leftovers home after family dinners. I wish it were only paperwork, I answered gently. What do you mean? Ethan spent weeks telling me to become another woman. I know he shouldn't have compared you. And the woman he wanted me to imitate protects everything she owns with a prenup. A pause. I didn't know that. Neither did Ethan. Another pause. Then she sighed. That does make this harder. It doesn't make it harder. It makes it clearer. She never argued. When we ended the call, I realized something. The people who actually listened rarely fought me. Only the people who had already chosen a side. Tuesday afternoon brought something far more uncomfortable. Security from my office called my extension. Miss Mercer. Yes. There's a gentleman downstairs, asking for you. I don't have appointments. He says it's important. What's his name? Ethan's brother. I closed my laptop. I'll be down. Michael was pacing in the lobby. The moment he saw me, he walked forward. We need to talk. About the prenup. You know exactly what this is about. I had a feeling. You've gone too far. I've protected what I built. You've humiliated my brother. I folded my arms. He told me to become Jessica. So, I did. No, you didn't. I copied her financial model. He rubbed his forehead impatiently. That's not what he meant. What did he mean? He wanted generosity. I offered partnership. He doesn't feel safe. I couldn't help smiling sadly. Neither do I. He stared. You know what this is really about. No, tell me. You have money. I have assets. Same difference. No. He frowned. Money can disappear. Assets represent years of discipline. He shook his head. You think you're better than him. I think I'm responsible for myself. You're impossible. I'm prepared. He turned and walked away. Security approached me after he disappeared through the revolving door. Everything okay? It is now. Do you want us to note the incident? Please. As I rode the elevator back upstairs, I wondered how many more family members Ethan planned to send. Wednesday morning brought another surprise. An email from our wedding venue. Dear Miss Mercer, Mr. Cole contacted us requesting information regarding postponement of your wedding. Since you paid the primary deposit, we require confirmation from both parties before making any changes. My stomach dropped. He had tried to postpone our wedding without speaking to me. I immediately called the venue. The coordinator sounded relieved. I'm glad you called, she admitted. He seemed very determined. The wedding hasn't been canceled, so you don't want us to postpone? No. If either of us wants to cancel, we'll discuss it together first. Understood. After hanging up, I stared at the engagement photo framed beside my desk. We looked so happy. I remembered that day. The photographer had kept telling us to laugh naturally. Now I wondered whether Ethan had already begun comparing me to Jessica even then. Thursday evening hurt more than I expected. I unlocked my condo and immediately knew someone was inside. A pair of shoes rested beside the entryway. Ethan still had a key. He was sitting on the couch surrounded by our wedding binder, color samples, guest lists, seating charts. The future we had spent months building. He stood when he saw me. His eyes were red, not performatively red, genuinely exhausted. We have to fix this. His voice cracked. The invitations go out next month. I remained standing. We can. Hope flashed across his face. Really? Sign the prenup. The hope vanished almost instantly. I can't. Why? It isn't fair. It protects us equally. You have more, and it doesn't feel equal. No, Ethan. I placed my purse on the kitchen counter. It feels uncomfortable. That's different. It isn't. He looked around the condo. At the photographs. At the shelves we had assembled together. At the kitchen island where we had eaten hundreds of meals. Do you really want to lose all this? I don't. Then why are you making this so hard? I'm not. You are. You have exactly 2 options. He looked away. I know. Sign. Or walk away. He swallowed. What if we compromise? I'm listening. I'll sign. Relief flickered inside me. Then he continued. If you pay my student loans first. The relief disappeared. $45,000. It would show you, trust me. No. He blinked. No. I'm your future husband. And those loans are your responsibility. You could afford it. I could, but I won't. His expression hardened. You're really going to let us end over money? No. I stepped closer. We're ending because you believe love should require me to buy your trust. He stared at me. I could almost see the argument collapsing inside his mind. Nothing else remained. He quietly picked up his jacket. I never thought you'd become this cold. I never thought you'd ask me to finance your signature. He left without slamming the door. The silence afterward lasted nearly an hour. Friday morning, Alicia called. Ethan's attorney contacted me. What happened? He wants informal negotiations. I assume you declined. I did. Later that afternoon, my phone rang again. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Caroline. The voice belonged to Ethan's attorney. This is Martin. I thought attorney-to-attorney communication was standard. I was hoping to save everyone legal expenses. So was I. He hesitated. My client has concerns. I've read his concerns. Perhaps there's flexibility. There isn't. Surely paying part of his student debt? I have his handwritten demands. Silence. He wrote them himself. Another silence. I've scanned every page. His breathing changed. If necessary, I can provide copies. He cleared his throat. I'll speak with my client. Please do. The conversation ended abruptly. Apparently, Ethan hadn't told his own lawyer everything. By evening, his best friend texted me. You're really ending your engagement over paper. I answered honestly. If a fair agreement destroys a relationship, then the relationship wasn't strong enough to survive marriage. She responded immediately. You're stubborn. No. I'm finally paying attention. Saturday afternoon brought what felt like the final act. Ethan arrived with both of his parents. Richard looked exhausted. Diane looked ready for battle. We've prepared something, Diane announced before she even sat down. She handed me a thick folder. I expected revisions to the prenup. Instead, I found something entirely different. No prenup. Full marital access to my condominium, if we lived there after marriage. Mandatory payoff of Ethan's student loans within the first year. A luxury vehicle purchased for Ethan. Maintenance of his existing lifestyle, regardless of future financial circumstances. A $75,000 family planning account funded entirely by me before children were even discussed. Page after page. Requirement after requirement. Each one flowed in a single direction. Toward Ethan. Nothing protected me. Nothing limited spending. Nothing acknowledged the assets I already owned. I looked up slowly. This is your middle ground. Richard shifted uncomfortably. We're trying to find compromise. I almost laughed. This isn't compromise. Diane leaned forward. Marriage means sharing. Partnership means sharing. This makes me a provider with obligations. What obligations does Ethan have? He'll be your husband. And financially? Silence. I looked at Ethan. He couldn't meet my eyes. The answer was there. There had never been another column. Only mine. I closed the folder. The answer is no. Diane's expression darkened. Then there won't be a wedding. I looked at Ethan. He still said nothing. If that's your decision, I replied quietly, I'll accept it. Richard stood first. He seemed years older than when he had entered. Let's go. Diane muttered something under her breath as she headed toward the door. Ethan remained behind for one final moment. So, this is really it? No. I met his eyes. This was over the day you asked why I couldn't be another woman. He searched my face, perhaps expecting hesitation. There wasn't any left. He nodded once, then walked away. I closed the door gently. Not because I wasn't hurting, because I finally understood something. The prenup had never stood between Ethan and me. Entitlement had. The document had simply given it a name. After Ethan walked out of my condominium that afternoon, something unexpected happened. Silence. No angry texts. No emotional speeches. No surprise visits. No family members telling me I was destroying true love over a legal document. For nearly a week, my phone barely rang. At first, I wondered if he had finally accepted reality. Then I realized he was probably trying to make me miss him. Instead, I began doing something neither of us had expected. I started dismantling our future. The first call was to the wedding venue. The coordinator recognized my voice immediately. I'm so sorry you're going through this, she said gently, after I explained that the wedding would not be happening. We'll cancel everything. I understand the deposit is non-refundable. It is. I expected that. Losing $6,500 hurt, but writing another check for the remaining balance would have hurt far more. Over the next 2 days, I contacted the caterer, the florist, the photographer, the DJ. Each conversation felt like crossing another item off a life that no longer existed. By the time everything had been canceled, I had lost just over $9,000 in deposits. It wasn't a small amount, but every canceled contract reminded me of something important. Expensive mistakes become far more expensive when you refuse to stop making them. On the 5th day of silence, Jessica called. This time, she didn't sound awkward. She sounded guilty. Caroline. I leaned back on my balcony, looking over the city. Hi, Jessica. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. I do. She hesitated. I should have stopped Ethan every time he compared you to me. I remained quiet. I thought he was just complimenting our marriage. He wasn't. I know that now. She sighed. I also wanted to tell you something. I'm listening. Our prenup. She laughed softly. Actually saved our marriage. That wasn't what I expected. What do you mean? About a year after we got married, Daniel and I went through a rough period. She paused. I almost left. I frowned. I didn't know that. Very few people did. What happened? Stress. Work. Family. We stopped communicating. And the prenup helped. It meant neither of us was trapped. I stayed silent. If I had walked away, we both knew exactly what would happen financially. No ugly lawsuits. No trying to destroy each other. No bargaining with fear. Knowing I could leave fairly made me feel safe enough to stay and fight for the marriage. Her words settled deep inside me. The protection created trust, I said quietly. Exactly. That's what Ethan never understood. Jessica answered softly. I think he understood. I frowned. What do you mean? He just didn't like being on the side that wasn't benefiting. After we ended the call, I sat outside long after sunset. For weeks, everyone had treated the prenup as proof that I didn't trust Ethan. Jessica had just described it as the very thing that allowed trust to survive difficult seasons. The difference wasn't the document. It was the people signing it. A few days later, Richard called. Could we meet? We chose a quiet neighborhood bar. Neither of us normally visited. He looked exhausted. Older somehow. He ordered coffee instead of beer. I'm sorry, he said before either of us touched our drinks. You've already apologized. Not enough. He stared into his cup. I spent years keeping peace inside my family. He smiled sadly. I thought avoiding conflict made me a good husband. It doesn't. No. He nodded. It just lets bad ideas grow. I didn't interrupt. Most of Ethan's thinking about money came from Diane. I know. I should have challenged it years ago. You can't change the past. No. He looked at me. But I can admit when someone else was right. Another long silence. He's still convinced someone else will give him everything he wanted. I smiled faintly. Maybe someone will. Richard shook his head. Not someone who built her own future. Before we left, he reached for the check. I protested. He insisted. Consider it repayment for wasting your time. It wasn't about the coffee. It was his quiet way of apologizing for everything his family had become. Around 2 weeks after our breakup, another letter arrived. This one came from Ethan's attorney. He wanted to keep the engagement ring. His argument was simple. The ring had been a gift. Therefore, it belonged to him. Alicia smiled when she read the letter. Conditional gift. She looked up. The condition was marriage. No marriage. No gift. She responded with several pages of case law. 3 days later, Ethan agreed to return it. Before he did, however, I changed every lock in my condominium. It cost me $240. Money well spent. That same evening, the security camera on my front door alerted me. Ethan. He inserted his old key. Nothing happened. He tried again. Then again. Finally, he looked directly into the camera. You changed the locks? I answered through the speaker. Yes. You seriously locked me out. The wedding is over. My things are still inside. They've been packed for 2 weeks. His face fell. I'll have everything delivered. You can't do this. I already did. His expression twisted into anger. You've changed. I almost answered. Instead, I realized something. No. I hadn't changed. I had simply stopped apologizing for protecting myself. He shouted a few more insults before leaving. I saved the recording, not because I expected legal problems, because I wanted one permanent reminder of the moment I finally chose myself. A few days later, Ethan returned the ring. We met outside my building. Neither of us smiled. He placed the small velvet box into my hand. For several seconds, he looked at it without speaking. So that's it. I nodded. Yes. He turned and walked away. No dramatic goodbye, no final embrace. Just two strangers carrying memories that no longer belong to the same future. I sold the ring the following week. It brought in nearly $12,000, enough to recover most of the wedding deposits. I transferred the money directly into my investment account, the same account Ethan had once assumed would eventually become ours. As news of the breakup spread, mutual friends began contacting me. Some believed Ethan's version. Others believed mine. Most simply wanted gossip. I refused to insult him. Whenever someone asked what happened, I gave the same answer. We discovered we had incompatible views about financial partnership. If they continued pushing, I explained the BMW comparisons, Jessica's prenup, the double standard. That usually ended the conversation. Near the end of the month, I received one final text from an unfamiliar number. I hope you're happy. You destroyed everything over money. I stared at the screen for almost a minute. A month earlier, I would have written a long explanation. I would have defended myself, tried to make him understand. Instead, I blocked the number, without replying, because some conversations stop being productive the moment one person refuses to hear the truth. Life slowly became quieter. I started seeing a therapist, not because I regretted ending the engagement, because I wanted to understand why I had ignored so many warning signs. Looking back, they had always been there. The casual comments about expensive vacations, the jokes about marrying well, the subtle disappointment whenever I chose saving over spending. None of those moments had seemed large enough to end a relationship. Together, they formed a pattern I could no longer ignore. Alicia called one afternoon after the final paperwork was complete. You handled this exactly right. I don't feel like I won. You didn't. She smiled gently. You avoided losing. There was a difference. A week later, Daniel invited me to dinner. Jessica was there. So was Richard. Conversation came easily for the first time in months. At one point, Daniel laughed. When you texted asking about our prenup, I thought you were just curious. I was. But I also listened. Jessica smiled. You matched my energy perfectly. I laughed for the first time in what felt like forever. The entire energy. The gifts. The planning. The protection. She raised her glass. Exactly. Driving home that night, I realized something that had taken me months to understand. The prenup never ended my engagement. It exposed the foundation underneath it. Ethan wanted generosity without responsibility, security without accountability, access without contribution. He wanted the rewards of everything I had spent years building, while rejecting the boundaries that protected those achievements. I wanted partnership, real partnership, the kind built on transparency instead of entitlement, the kind where neither person fears fairness. So yes, I lost $9,000 in wedding deposits. I lost the future I thought I was building. I lost the man I believed I knew. But I kept something far more valuable: my self-respect, my financial independence, my peace, and perhaps the most important lesson of my life. When someone repeatedly tells you to become another person, don't become someone else. Become someone who finally recognizes exactly who they're standing beside.